The courtroom went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. My mother-in-law stood 3 feet away from the bench, smoothing the front of her blazer like she always did when she thought she'd already won. She didn't look at me. She never looked at me directly anymore. Not since I'd filed the motion. Not since her attorney had called mine and said in so many words that I should consider withdrawing before I embarrassed myself further. I sat at the plaintiff's table and kept my hands flat on the wood in front of me, still, calm, the way my grandmother had taught me when I was 9 years old and the world felt like it was caving in. Keep your hands still, baby. Still hands mean a still mind. Gran had been gone for 6 years. I thought about her every single day. I should back up. My name is Nora. Wait. No. I've told this story so many times in my head that I keep starting in the wrong place. Let me start where it actually began, which was not in a courtroom. It was in a kitchen. My mother-in-law's kitchen, to be exact, on a Sunday afternoon in October 4 years before any of this. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and burnt sugar. She always burnt the caramel the first time, and then pretended she'd meant to start over. I'd learned not to mention it. "You're still working at the clinic?" she asked. She had her back to me, stirring something on the stove. "Yes," I said. "Still at the clinic." She made a small sound, not quite a laugh, something shorter than that, compressed and dismissive, like a period at the end of a sentence she'd already decided to write. "How practical," she said. That was her word for me. Practical. She used it the way other people used words like limited or unremarkable. She had a gift for compliments that weren't. My husband, her son Elliot, was in the backyard with his father, the two of them doing something with the gas grill that apparently required full concentration and 45 minutes. I was alone with her the way I was often alone with her, trapped by politeness, smiling past things I should have named out loud. "Elliot mentioned you've been putting in late nights," she said. "The caseload's been heavy." Another stir. "It's good that you have something to keep you busy." I was 31 years old. I had a graduate degree and a licensure and 7 years of patient files with my signature on them. Something to keep me busy. I smiled. I went and refilled my water glass. I looked out the window at Elliot and his father and thought, someday. I wasn't sure yet what that word meant. I only knew I was storing things up. Elliot and I had met in our late 20s at a conference in Atlanta, which is the kind of origin story that sounds boring until you're the one living it. He was warm and funny, and he laughed with his whole body, and I loved him genuinely and completely for a long time. His mother was a different matter. She came from a family where the women didn't work after marriage, or rather, they worked in ways that were socially acceptable. Charity boards, fundraisers, the kind of volunteerism that got your name in the program. She had been a debutante. Her mother had been a debutante. She had expected Elliot to marry someone who understood that world. He married me instead. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. My grandmother raised me after my mother left, and Gran worked the front desk at a dental office for 23 years. She had a small framed quote on the refrigerator that said, "Dignity is not given. It is earned and it is kept." I read it every morning while I ate cereal before school. I read it so many times I stopped seeing it, the way you stop seeing things that become part of you. My mother-in-law's name was Vivienne. I never called her that out loud. She'd asked me to call her Mom early on, in that tone that meant it wasn't actually a request, but something in me couldn't do it. Some stubborn, quiet, gran-raised part of me refused to give her that word when she'd done nothing to earn it. So I said you and her and navigated around it for 4 years. The first time she made me feel truly small was at their anniversary party. Elliot's parents had been married 35 years, and Vivienne had planned the celebration herself. A rented hall, a live quartet, white tablecloths and orchid centerpieces, and a slideshow of photographs that somehow didn't include a single image of me, even though Elliot and I had been married for 2 years by then. I noticed it about halfway through. The slideshow looped. I watched it loop twice to be sure. There I wasn't. Again. I mentioned it to Elliot that night in the car. He sighed the particular sigh he used when he wanted me to let something go. She probably just pulled old photos, he said. It wasn't intentional. It looped for 40 minutes, Elliot. She's not great with technology. I turned and looked out the window and didn't say anything else. Outside, the highway lights strobed past in orange intervals. I counted them the way I'd counted ceiling tiles in the dentist's chair as a kid, not because it helped, but because it gave my hand somewhere to go that wasn't his arm, shaking it, demanding that he see what he was choosing not to see. He was a good man. I want to be clear about that because this is not a story about a bad husband. It's a story about a woman who let herself disappear slowly, in small enough increments that no single moment ever felt like the one to stand up for. Until there was one. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have been for 8 years now. I specialize in trauma, which is a word people think they understand until they're sitting across from someone who's lived inside it. My caseload at the clinic ran 40 patients a week, some of them court-mandated, some of them self-referred, most of them somewhere in between. I'd also, over the past 3 years, been doing something I hadn't told many people about. I'd been building a private practice on the side. It started small, a referral from a colleague, then another. Then a hospital system in our city approached me about providing contracted therapy services for their staff. Nurses, residents, administrators cycling through burnout at a rate that alarmed even their HR department. I said yes. I restructured. I brought on 2 associates. I rented a second office. By the time that Sunday kitchen conversation happened, the something to keep you busy Sunday, I had 17 contracted employees and billing that cleared 6 figures monthly. I hadn't told Elliot's family. Not because I was hiding it exactly. More because I'd watched the way they received my existence in pieces, and I knew that this particular piece would be handled wrong, would be minimized or redirected or used somehow. I was protective of it the way you're protective of a thing that's purely yours. Gran used to say, not everything needs to be shared with people who don't know how to hold it. I held it. I waited. I wasn't sure yet what I was waiting for. The situation with the estate started 2 months after Elliot's father passed. Elliot's father, to his credit, had seen me, really seen me, asked follow-up questions about my work, remembered the names of things I'd mentioned, looked me in the eye. His death hit Elliot hard and fast, and I spent 6 weeks being whatever my husband needed me to be, which meant I wasn't paying close attention to what was happening on the other side of the family. What was happening was this. Vivian had decided to contest a portion of her late husband's estate that had been left in a separate trust document to Elliot. Specifically, to Elliot and me jointly as his spouse. Her husband had revised the document 18 months before he died. Vivian believed the revision had been made under what she called undue influence. The undue influence, as far as I could tell from the legal language her attorney used, was me. She was claiming I had somehow manipulated her husband into altering his estate plan in my favor. I found out through Elliot. He came home one Thursday evening and sat down on the edge of our bed and told me in a flat, careful voice that his mother was moving forward with a legal challenge. He said it like he was delivering a weather report. Like it was a thing that was happening to both of us equally, from the outside. I looked at him for a long moment. She's accusing me, I said. She's contesting the trust. Elliot, she's accusing me of manipulating your father. He rubbed his face. She's grieving. I got up and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was doing its ordinary evening things. A dog being walked, a sprinkler cutting arcs across someone's front lawn, a kid on a bicycle. Normal. All of it completely normal. I'm going to need you to decide something, I said. I kept my voice even. I'd spent 8 years teaching people how to hold difficult conversations. I was not going to lose mine now. I'm going to need you to decide whether you're going to stand next to me or whether you're going to stand in the middle, because there is no middle in this. He didn't answer right away. I took that answer and put it somewhere I'd deal with later. I hired an attorney. Her name was Petra, sharp and precise, and the kind of person who asked questions in a sequence that made you feel like you were being very carefully assembled into something useful. In our first meeting, she went through everything: the trust documents, the timeline, the nature of my relationship with Elliot's father. "Did you have any role in the revision of this document?" she asked. "Nah. Did you ever discuss the estate with your father-in-law directly?" He mentioned it once, about 2 years ago. He said he'd been thinking about fairness, and that he wanted Elliot's share to be protected regardless of what happened in the family. I told him that was between him and his attorney. Petra looked at me over the top of her glasses. "That's it?" "That's it." She wrote something down. Then she said, "I'm going to need your financial disclosures, both personal and business." I slid a folder across the table. I'd prepared it before the meeting. She opened it, read for about 30 seconds. Then she looked up at me with an expression that wasn't quite surprise but was adjacent to it. "Ems," she started, then corrected herself. "How long has this practice been operating at this revenue?" 14 months at current scale, I said. 3 years total. She looked back down at the folder, then back up. "Your mother-in-law's legal team is arguing that you needed this inheritance, that you were financially motivated." I didn't say anything. Petra set the folder down slowly. This rather significantly undermines that argument." "I know," I said. She almost smiled. "Did you know they were going to make that argument when you put this folder together?" I had a feeling. She did smile then, just barely. "Good," she said. "That's good." The months between that meeting and the court date were not easy. Elliot moved through the period like a man walking on ice, careful, deliberate, testing every step. He wasn't cruel. He never said anything outright that I could point to. But there were dinners he attended alone, phone calls he took in the other room, silences that stretched too long after I mentioned the case. I'd been a counselor long enough to know what I was watching. A man triangulated between 2 women he loved, choosing the path of least friction so consistently that he'd stopped noticing he was choosing at all. I kept working. I picked up 2 new hospital contracts. I ran my Wednesday group sessions and my Thursday intensives, and I drove home at night and made dinner and kept my hands still and my face calm, and I stored things up. I visited Gran's grave on a Saturday in March, which is something I'd done every year since she died. The cemetery was near the neighborhood where I grew up, and the streets around it hadn't changed much. Same gas station on the corner, same chain pharmacy with the flickering sign. I sat next to her headstone for a while without saying anything. Then I said, "I think I finally know what I was waiting for." The financial disclosure hearing was not dramatic in the way television court scenes are dramatic. It was a small room, a lot of paper, and a judge who read everything with the careful attention of someone who did not like having her time wasted. Vivian's attorney made his argument: my inadequate financial standing, my motivation, my influence over a man in his final years. Then Petra introduced the documentation: business registration, tax filings, active contracts, staff payroll records, the hospital system agreement, which was a matter of public record, a letter from my clinic director describing my professional standing, a second letter from a state licensing board confirming my status in good standing for the duration of the relevant period, and then quietly the final item: a signed letter from the estate attorney who had drawn up the revised trust document confirming that the revision had been initiated entirely by Elliot's father at a meeting my husband's attorney had attended, at which I had not been present. I watched Vivian's face while Petra read the letter into the record. I don't know exactly what I was looking for. Some acknowledgement, maybe. Some flicker of recognition that she had built an entire case on a story she'd told herself about me. A story that required me to be desperate, grasping, manipulative, because that story was easier than the truth. The truth was that her husband had seen me clearly and had wanted to protect what was Elliot's. The truth was that I had never needed anything from their family in the way she'd believed I did. She didn't look at me. She looked straight ahead. The judge ruled in our favor. Outside the courthouse house, the afternoon was bright and cold, the kind of early spring day that looks like warmth but isn't. I sat on a bench near the parking structure and called my office manager to check on the afternoon appointments. Everything was running on schedule. Elliot found me there. He sat down next to me without saying anything for a minute. I should have, he started. Yeah, I said. He was quiet again. Then, I'm sorry. I looked at him. I loved him. I want to be clear about that too, because it matters. The love was real, and it didn't disappear that afternoon, but it had changed shape. It had become something I had to decide about deliberately, which is different from something that simply holds you. I know you are, I said. We sat there for a while in the cold, bright light. I thought about Gran, about dignity not given but kept, about all the Sunday kitchens and anniversary slideshows and silences in cars that I had folded up neatly and placed somewhere interior and breathable, waiting for the moment they would mean something. They meant this. I had never once needed saving. I had only needed to outlast the story someone else was telling about me. Elliot and I went to counseling, not with anyone I knew professionally, obviously, but with a colleague I respected, a man named Dr. Osi, who had a practice on the west side of the city and a gift for sitting with uncomfortable silence. We went for 8 months. Some of those sessions were very hard. Some of them were the most honest conversations Elliot and I had ever had, including about the years I'd spent making myself smaller in rooms where I thought smallness was the cost of staying. I stopped making myself smaller. It sounds simple. It wasn't. Vivian did not apologize. I did not expect her to. She withdrew from our lives with the quiet efficiency of someone reorganizing a room, moving things to a different shelf rather than acknowledging they'd been in the wrong place. Elliot navigated that loss in his own way. I tried to give him room to do it without it becoming my project. I had my own room to reorganize. 3 years later, the hospital system I'd contracted with invited me to speak at their annual mental health conference. The topic was burnout in medical professionals, something I'd been working with long enough that I had real things to say about it, not platitudes. Actual data, actual cases, actual patterns I'd watched unfold across hundreds of patient hours. I prepared for 6 weeks. I wrote and rewrote. I stood in my living room and practiced until the words felt less like a presentation and more like a conversation. The conference was held at the downtown convention center, the big one with the glass atrium and the terrible parking. There were about 400 people in the room. I had spoken to groups before, but not like this, not at this scale, not with this weight of expectation. I stood in the wings and watched the moderator at the podium and felt something I could only describe as calm, not the performed calm I'd learned in Vivian's kitchen. Real calm. The kind that comes from knowing what you've built and knowing it's yours and knowing that no one's opinion of it can unmake it. The moderator called my name. I walked out. I looked at the room, 400 people, a sea of name badges and professional clothes and tired eyes. And I thought about a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus and a refrigerator quote I'd read until I stopped seeing it and a grandmother who'd known without ever having to explain it to me, that a still hand means a still mind. I said, I want to start by asking how many of you have spent the last year taking care of everyone around you while quietly running out of road. Half the hands in the room went up, and I started talking.